Podcasting is more than just talking. It's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast featuring Ruth King, this time around, a seasoned entrepreneur who has over 25 years of experience running businesses. And from what I've read, about 8 different businesses that you've started, Ruth. I'd like to talk to you about that to begin with. What makes you a good entrepreneur, you think?
First of all, I am comfortable with risk. I come up with great ideas. I research the ideas before we do them and learn from my mistakes and don't make them again, and understand the financial side of business so that I know when something's working and not working, at least from a financial perspective.
Do you think that's a problem that a lot of people have, is that they don't learn from their mistakes and they keep going after the goal without really knowing what the end game will be?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it from a perspective of divorce, which is not really in this business side of it, but how many times does somebody gets divorced and they marry almost the twin of the person they divorced?
I've got a couple of friends that have done that, and I think we all probably do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you don't learn it from a personal perspective, but from a business perspective, if you make the same mistakes twice, it can kill you.
That's the ugly truth. Speaking of the ugly truth, that's kind of the name of your series of books that you've written, is The Ugly Truth. Why did you go with that, Ruth?
Because if people aren't aware of the truth, it can be very ugly. Like, the ugly truth about small business is that the American dream can be a nightmare if you don't pay attention. And then the ugly truth about managing people is if you don't pay attention, managing can be really ugly. So if you do it right, then you're in a situation where you're going to learn from the mistakes of others. Granted, you will make some mistakes, but you're going to learn from a whole lot of other people and never make those mistakes. And that's what the entire series is about. It's all small business owners who have shared what has gone on with them and the mistakes that they made and what they learned, in hopes that when people read these books that they won't make the same mistakes and they won't have the same heartache, financial issues, et cetera, that they had.
Honestly, failure, I think, is a big point that a lot of people are afraid of, but I believe that failure is what causes a lot of people to succeed.
I would challenge most people to say, okay, Bill Gates failed. I don't know whether Jeff Bezos failed, but I mean, more than like most significant billionaires have at least one bankruptcy in their background. And then at some point in time, you've got the cash flow behind you that you look at the risk and say, okay, what percentage of my cash am I actually willing to risk, bet, whatever word you want to use, on this particular venture? And I think one of the things in The Ugly Truth about small business, when I talked to the gentleman who actually basically lost everything because of a bank, one of his comments to me was, when two partners get together, it's really good because you can make a decision, okay, if 10 happens, we go here. If 0 happens, we go here. What happens if 8 happens?
So what does happen when 8 happens? Is it all about being flexible, Ruth?
Yes, it's totally about being flexible. And it's about everybody having the same goals and the same, and as you said, the same end game in mind.
So what if somebody doesn't have the same goals? Because as well as I do, more than half of the marriages out there fail. A lot of the businesses fail. Most restaurants fail. How do you go about knowing that failure may be closer than you think to move forward with trying to start your small business?
First of all, get a customer. If you don't have a customer, you don't have a business. Make sure that you understand, and I go back to the financials again, but make sure you understand the financial side, because without the financial side, you've got a hobby. If you are in there just to have fun with it, you got a hobby. If you're not interested in making money and having fun, you got a hobby. If you're in business, you have fun, yes, but you've got to make a profit, and you have to understand how to make a profit.
How did you become an entrepreneur? What was your gateway into the entrepreneurship, if you will? My
father is an entrepreneur. My grandfather is an entrepreneur. And even though my grandmother really and truly was not an entrepreneur per se, she left her homeland at the age of 16 when World War I broke out, came to the United States with a trunk on Ellis Island, and ended up doing really, really, really well for herself. So I think it's in my blood, number one. I have never been afraid of taking risks because I've grown up with risk takers. I've watched risk takers. I had my first business in, cutting flowers and things like that and selling flowers. And it wasn't the lemonade stand. I wasn't into lemonade stand, but I babysat. I did this. I literally made money from the time I was probably 7 or 8 years old.
Right.
So I really and truly grew up with it. When I got the financial knowledge for it was when I started working and realized that's what I didn't want to do, and went back to school and got my MBA while I was still working at night, the light bulb just went on, not off, because I really and truly understood the financial side of it and how easy it was and really and truly was for me and how well I can actually explain it to the world. I mean, I grew up as a chemical engineer and then got an MBA in finance, and I promise you, financials are so much easier than chemical engineering equations.
Oh, I'll bet. But you said it's easy, and I'm guessing that a lot of people listening right now may have had some struggles with starting their business or getting things going, or they've got a great idea that's $1 million idea, but they end up taking it into, debt.
Yeah, you've got the $1 million idea. Here's my thing about that. My thing is always find a customer first, all right? And then once you find a customer and see what they're willing to pay and you get a testimonial and those types of things, you can always build up your business if you know what your costs are. All right. So I've got the $1 million idea, and the thing that absolutely drives me crazy is they say, okay, let me talk to my friends about it. And your friends go, oh, that's a phenomenal idea. The next question should be, would you invest in my idea?
Right. I knew right where you're going as soon as you said, because your friends are all they're going to be your biggest, hey, great job, Ruth. Good job. Fantastic. Okay, you going to be a customer? No, I don't want to be a customer. But it's a really good idea.
Yeah, then they're not either your friend, number one, or they have no need for it, number two, or it's really not a good idea and they just don't want to hurt your feelings. Figure out which of the three it is.
Right. So once you get past that, once you have a customer or two or three and hopefully 100, how do you go about growing then or sizing it up from there? Scaling it, if you will, from there.
Scaling it from there. Then it's a lot of marketing, what worked well, getting testimonials from your existing customers, finding customers like them, asking them for referrals and building it up through referrals. A lot of things are done now through, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, a lot of the Facebook advertising that's get done and Pinterest and you name it on social media, but you still have to understand who your customer base is, why they buy, when they buy. And the other thing that I would strongly suggest that you do is have something that's recurring revenue, i.e. something that somebody will buy once a month, once a quarter, once every 6 months, whatever, so that you can build your consistent cash flow.
That makes a lot of sense. That's probably in your third book, isn't it? The Ugly Truth About Cash?
Yep, it is in the third book. I wasn't smart enough back in the first one.
Well, let me ask you this, because it seems like you're a serial entrepreneur. From one book it says 7, and the latest book says 8 different businesses. So I'm assuming that you're always creating, always trying to find the next biggest, best thing. Why keep creating? Why not just keep growing with ones that you may have started and grown to this point?
There's always an end game to every business that you've got. All right. So my thing of it is I'd rather grow it and sell it and then do the next thing. Being an entrepreneur, I am a terrible manager of a business that's in stasis. I get bored. I learned that lesson.
Right.
All right. I'm much better at starting things, growing them to a certain point, and selling them or letting somebody buy it who's really good at taking it to the next level, being good with managing huge amounts of teams and overheads and, quite frankly, political garbage, and I'll just put it that way because I don't do politics really well, even though there are even in the businesses that I have. But I look at it, I know what my strengths are, and my strengths are let's figure it out, let's make it work, and then sell it off to somebody who can take it to the next level, and I'll go find out the next thing.
That's great advice right there, is to know your strengths and play to them, and know your weaknesses and have other people play to them or help you out with things that you're not good at. It's simple. It sounds super simple, Ruth.
Everything in the abstract is simple. We make it complicated. I mean, finding everything makes it complicated, simply because you've got to make sure the customers are there. I mean, when we started Profitability Revolution, it took us 6 months of throwing spaghetti against the wall to figure out how to find the market for this. And we finally did. And, it's 6 months of frustration and 6 months of, oh, my gosh, this didn't work and this didn't work. And you talk about failure. I mean, I look at it, okay, that didn't work. Next. I'm not going to basically spend a whole lot of time, effort, and energy on something that didn't work, trying to make it work. Let's try the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And finally we hit it. I mean, it just took about 6 months of throwing spaghetti against a wall. And sometimes that's what happens.
How do you go about sleeping then in those times, that 6 months when you're struggling to try to make something work and it's not? I have a difficult time sleeping when it comes to who am I going to be talking with tomorrow on my show. I couldn't imagine having, thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up into an idea and then have it be not working,
Yeah. I mean, actually, for me, I go running. That's how I get my ideas. That's how I solve problems, is I run on them. And I know that if I'm really frustrated with something, 45 minutes on the treadmill, 9-minute miles, I'll have an answer. It may not be the right one, but I'll have something by the end of it. Or, go out and run, 5-10 miles, and I got an answer. It just comes to me. And then I sleep. I promise you, if you run 10 miles or 20 miles that day, you'll sleep that night.
Oh, yeah. I come up with a lot of my answers while I'm sleeping or while I'm fading in and out of my REM sleep.
Yeah. Who used to do that? Einstein. When he had a problem, he would sit in a darkened room until he figured out the answer to that solution, go to sleep, and then when he woke up, he had the answer.
Huh. Yeah, I'm no Einstein. In the book, The Ugly Truth About Small Business, what did you learn when you were writing it?
Oh my gosh, I learned so much from that book. Number one, never have one banker. Because if you have only one banker and all your eggs in one banking basket, if that bank changes hands, gets sold, they decide they don't like your loans anymore, then you are out of luck. And so I now have relationships with 3 banks as a result of writing that book. Number two, and looking at it from a perspective of never, ever, ever give up if you totally believe in what you're doing. One of the stories in the book is a woman who had 80% of her business through a government EPA law that said you had to have this type of equipment. Well, the EPA on July 1st of whatever year it was said, okay, now you don't have to have it. And 80% of her business went away. And she managed to survive, and then she ended up selling the business a couple of years later. So, I mean, you just never, ever, 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 ever give up if you totally believe in what you're doing. You'll find a way.
That's actually some great advice right there. And I've found that a couple of different times in things that I've done, that the more I believe in myself, the more I push myself, the harder I push myself, the harder I'm working, the more success comes.
It's true. Absolutely. Keep at it. And, the other thing that you need that is really good is if you are married, if you have kids, they have to be behind you. They can't be, oh, dear sweetie, why aren't you home? Because then you get into a tug of war between business and personal. They have to understand for the next couple of years you're going to be working on the business, and you might not be able to go and spend all the time that you used to on, maybe baseball games and soccer games and dance recitals and all the other fun stuff like that. And because you're working on the business, and then the rewards will come later. Do
you think that people nowadays are more into the rewards right now than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago?
It depends. If you're a millennial, yes. If you're a baby boomer like me, probably not. Because we grew up with it. Millennials are into the now generation. I want to give back, but what's in it for me? So I think it depends on where you are.
As I was paging through your book, as I was looking through The Ugly Truth, 3 different times my thumb stopped on my industry was male-dominated, and I don't know why it was, but 3 different times it popped on there. So I'm going to ask you, what does that mean in the book? My business was male-dominated.
I grew up in a male-dominated industry. I mean, I'm a chemical engineer, so a lot of times, one of 2 things can happen in the male-dominated industry if you're a woman. Number one, they're curious. Number one, whether you know what you're doing, whether you're good at what you're doing, and number 3, sometimes sales are easier to get in the door because if you're a woman in a male-dominated industry, and I don't, everybody's going to know that's not true, but it actually is. I see it every single day, even now when we're supposedly more gender neutral, and the women in male-dominated industries have to be really, really, really good at what we do, number one, and number 2, almost better than the guys.
Do you think that's changed over the last umpteen years?
No, we have a long way to go. In certain states, it's easier than in other states that are friendlier towards small business. If you look at the history of women who, quote-unquote, hit the glass ceiling, or blacks who hit the glass ceiling, or, any race that hits the glass ceiling, we go and we start small businesses where we can actually do really, really well and feel really, really good about what we're doing. In
the book, The Ugly Truth About Small Business, I also see there's one story here about getting fired, and I'll tell you what, probably the worst moment of my life was when I got fired from a job, but it turned out to be one of the better things that ever happened to me. Do you find that a lot of people feel that same way?
Yes. I call it a career readjustment program. I don't call it firing, because they are really good at something. They're just not really good working in your company, and you have to help them find the right and proper way of doing it. I think it's, IBM has a 90-day workout program, and that's mentioned in the book, in terms of, okay, we got 90 days to either work on this or decide that this isn't for you. And that's a fair amount of time. It's 3 months. It really and truly is, okay, here's what we have to do to make sure that everybody's following what needs to happen, and let's see whether you can do it.
Do you find that most people will know within 3 months if it's a fit or not?
Oh, yeah. You're going to know. You're going to absolutely know. I mean, firing should never be a surprise in my book. There should always be something that says, okay, we've talked about this. We've now talked about it and then written it in a second warning, sign here. And if it keeps happening, should be no surprises when somebody is fired. Right. None. Zero. Nada.
You've written 3 The Ugly Truth books, and there's also another book here called The Courage to be Profitable. Did you think in your wildest dreams that you would have been an author when you were growing up?
Yes and no. Until I was in 7th grade, I would never have thought of it. My 7th grade English teacher taught us how to write, and I have been writing ever since. And so did I think that I was going to be an author and have a published author and have a #1 bestseller, which was The Courage to be Profitable? Probably not in my, I wouldn't say in my wildest dreams, but now that I've done it, I want to do more of it, and continue on. And because my goal in life is to give people, an experience, the tools and processes and tactics that they can use to get and stay profitable and have a really profound positive impact on their lives. And I can't personally reach everybody. That's just not an impossibility. But I can do it through my writing. I can do it through my speaking. I can do it through conversations like you and I are having and being on your radio show. The more I can help small business owners get and stay profitable, the happier I am.
So is that a goal, is to reach as many people as you possibly can?
Yes, it is. It is my goal. I have a 45-year goal that I made when I was 55, until I'm 100, and it is.
I wish that you were here. I'd give you a high five for that one. I really would. Like, high five. Come on, Ruth, bring it up.
Yeah, so the goal is it's 1 million people with the books and 10 million people overall.
Wow. How close are you to your goal? How many people have you reached, do you think?
Book-wise, probably close to 100,000 now. Wow. Between all the books.
We were talking earlier about starting businesses and having your first customer. My son and one of his friends, they're 16 years old, and they started making their own lures, fishing lures, and they're starting their own business. And
Good.
And he's come to me and asked me some questions, and I've given him as much help as I can. And it's really cool to see a young entrepreneur go at it and have that desire, the drive, and the gusto that you don't see with a lot of older people.
Yes, that's true. And give them my books and make them read, especially The Courage to be Profitable.
I will give him that book. And I'm going to tell him that, he's got to work on getting his customers, because right now they're into buying stuff to make these, but I told them that they have to acquire customers so that way they can sell them and make the money in order to buy more stuff in order to make more.
Right. One of my colleagues' son he's also an entrepreneur, and they started a lawn care business, like 16, 17 years old. And by the time the kid was 19 and he wanted to go to college, they sold it, and he had enough money to go to a very, very good school, not necessarily, but anyway, a non-state school, and pay the tuition and have money left over, which was cool.
So with your 8 businesses, what type of business do you do? What type of entrepreneur are you?
So I have the consulting business, which is where I do the writing and everything else through that, and the training through that. We had a T-shirt business, which, as I've mentioned, I'm a chemical engineer, and back in the 80s, we did T-shirts like "Civil Engineers Give a Damn," all right, and then it's written in a damn format on a T-shirt, and other things with chemical engineers and stuff like that. And we sold it to the professional student societies of the organizations in colleges, and we did it. The overall goal of that business was to fund our trips to do the creative, and it did. All right, we wanted to do that as fun and have fun with it, and we did it. And then we got tired of doing it, and we didn't sell it off. We just stopped. We said we're not doing any this year, and it was over. I had a water business, which was the one time that I didn't do enough research, and 3 months into it, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, and I just stopped that. I've had computer graphics businesses. The internet broadcasting things that I do. I've done them for HVAC contractors and Profitability Revolution. And we're about ready to start another one based on the stuff that I'm doing in HVAC, which I really can't talk about right now until we get that one off the ground, but it's cool. And there's been lots of other things over the years, little bit things here and there.
Ruth King joining me, The Ugly Truth. She wrote 3 books about the ugly truth and the courage to be profitable. Another one of the ugly truths that I saw in the small business book is I let greed override my common sense. Do you find that greed is a big problem that a lot of small business owners and, heck, even large business owners have?
Yes, that's when you take risks that are not prudent risks.
How do you weigh out which risks are worth taking?
That's personal more than anything else. It's also done based on whether you think you can do it or not. And you're not betting the farm, if you know what I'm saying. It's like you're not putting all of your eggs in that basket. You're not putting all of your money and everything that you have into this thing. There is a safety net somewhere. Do
you think, speaking of safety nets, I know we talked earlier about your grandmother coming over from her home country back right after World War I. Do you think that you would be able to take a chunk of your life today and go somewhere else?
Yeah, because I know what I'm doing. And I could start over again. I could absolutely start over again today.
How do you get that confidence?
Screwing up as many times as I've done.
Do you mind if I ask you a couple of just weird off-the-wall questions?
Sure, go ahead.
What's the best thing that you ever bought?
Other than my book collection?
Always be marketing, right?
No. I mean, I'm talking about my book library. I'm talking about Think and Grow Rich from Napoleon Hill. I'm talking about Acres of Diamonds. I'm talking about the Babylon books by Clayson. I'm talking about my library. I'm not talking about the books that I wrote.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about the books that actually taught me. I'm talking about Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath. I'm talking about my library that I've learned over the years. I mean, I'm a voracious reader, not only writing, but I voraciously read everything that I can put my hands on. Usually a lot of biographies, a lot of things. Like I finished Richard Branson's latest biography. I do a lot with Jay Abraham, the stuff that he's done. I mean, so that's what I'm talking about. My business library, i.e. not my books, but my business library is probably the best investment I've ever made.
I've heard that from a lot of successful people, that reading is the key to them learning, and then they in turn use some of the stuff that they've learned into parlaying that into huge successes for themselves.
We learn from the mistakes of others. We learn from what others have done. And we just don't make the same mistakes they made. We talk a lot. We're not afraid to say, hey, I screwed up.
I love hearing that. I'm not afraid to screw up. What's your most useless talent?
Doing Sudoku puzzles.
Do you have to think about them, or can you just do them?
Depends on how hard they are. The easy ones I don't do anymore because they are too easy. The ones that are the really hard ones take me a little bit of time, but I generally get those.
Out of your 4 books, which would be the first one that somebody should read?
The Courage to be Profitable, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Get and Stay Profitable in Less Than 30 Minutes a Month.
Yep.
That's one that I'm going to have to read because my businesses are not profit. Well, they make a little bit of profit, but not enough to sustain me, you know?
Yeah, and then you've got to get your son to do it because he's making the lures. You've got to read that book.
Oh, I'm going to definitely give him the book and suggest and actually play back this part of this conversation to him, so that way he knows that we're actually talking about him. And I want him to be successful in what he's. I want all my kids to be successful in all the stuff that they do. You know.
Yeah, and love what they do.
To love what you do, that's something that I've done my entire. I've always loved my career choice, because if I don't, I have to get up at 4:00 in the morning to do my job, and if I didn't love it, there's no way in hell I'd get up, at 4 to do anything.
Sure, I agree.
What advice can you give to somebody to find that business that will be the one that they, that they want to eat, breathe, sleep, and live every day? What piece of advice could you give to somebody?
Some people are lucky, like my daughter was lucky, and I know this is going to be a long explanation, but she knew in 7th grade what she wanted to do for the rest of her life, and she's doing it. Other people, it just takes some time. And quite frankly, I mean, I've liked what I've done through my entire life. I mean, I've tried different things, and I suggest, especially when you're in your 20s and 30s, try a lot of stuff till you find something that you absolutely like. And then when I sat down when I was 55, and I really and truly, the light bulb went on in terms of where I was, what my life had brought me to, and where I was going to go for the last part of my life in terms of the things that I love to do, and it's writing and reading, and I think I've shared a lot of that with you. But when you're in your 20s and 30s, what did you like to do as a kid? I mean, and don't listen to your parents. My goodness. If it makes you feel good, go do it. And I'm not talking about something illegal. I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about from a business perspective. If you really think you want to try it, persevere until you find somebody who'll give you a shot. And you may like it, you may not, but at least you tried.
Ruth, I love that. I loved our conversation. It's been great. The ugly truth about small business, the ugly truth about cash, and the ugly truth about managing people, as well as the book, The Courage to be Profitable. Ruth King is my guest. Ruth, how do we find your books, and how do we find more of your awesomeness?
The books are all available on Amazon. Some of them are, quite frankly, 10 years old now. The first two Ugly Truth books are 2004, 2005. They're still available. You still can get it. And then you can always go to www.thecouragetobeprofitable.com, and all the books are there. And then the internet for small businesses is profitabilityrevolution.com. And got a quick question? Call me on the phone, 877-520-4321.
The BSing with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com.
This has been another podcastforhire.com production.